Mr. President, I rise today to discuss the HEALS Act. As we continue to confront this coronavirus pandemic, we have to ensure that our schools and our employers can safely reopen. And our health care providers must also have the resources they need to continue to provide the essential care to all Americans to fight this virus and to help this nation return to some semblance of normalcy as quickly as possible. Now, we have to also provide liability protection for those schools, businesses, and healthcare providers while they do their very best to operate safely during this unusual, once in a generation, once in multiple generations pandemic. The HEALS Act will help provide these protections. The HEALS Act also includes several provisions that I've been championing, including legislation to address unemployment insurance system reform. We know there have been a lot of challenges associated with legacy computer systems, and we should never, ever have to endure this again. Financial assistance to help child care providers reopen has also been another priority of mine, recognizing that our child care providers play an essential role, not just caring for our children and ensuring that they remain educated and in a safe environment when their parents aren't around, but also they're critical to our broader economy. If your kids aren't taken care of, you can't go to work, and Hoosiers want to go to work. And then finally, we have telehealth legislation that's been included in this HEALS Act that will lead to greater affordability and access, especially as many of these authorities are made permanent in the future. This is a way to bend the cost curve down and provide a higher value for each of those healthcare dollars moving forward. It also includes the Trust Act, something that I helped introduce to establish a bipartisan national plan to finally begin tackling the long-term drivers of our national debt once we get through this coronavirus pandemic. I've been talking about this, sometimes criticized for talking about fiscal responsibility in the largest drivers of our long-term national debt. I'm unapologetic every time I talk about that. This Trust Act would establish a bipartisan national plan to finally begin tackling this, and I hope it remains in the package as negotiations continue. Most importantly, I'm glad that the HEALS Act includes some really important features of my Restart Act, a bipartisan piece of legislation that I introduced with Senator Bennett. We now have somewhere north 42, 44 bipartisan co-sponsors. We have 50 national groups and growing that are supportive of this legislation, and it's very important that these features remain in the HEALS Act. Now, like my Restart Act, the HEALS Act recognizes the need for long-term working capital loans and targeting that relief toward businesses that have suffered significant revenue decline. We don't want more examples of businesses that are doing just fine in the wake of the pandemic getting access to monies that, frankly, they don't need. Instead, we want to target our resources towards the hardest hit businesses that won't survive this pandemic. That's what the Restart Act does, and I'm proud of those features that were included. However, I have to say, in order to truly assist the hardest hit small and medium-sized enterprises that have fallen through the gaps of previous programs, more of the Restart Act is going to have to be included throughout this negotiation process. Last night, I received a text from a longtime friend of mine. Her name is Sheila. Sheila is a resident of Dearborn County, Indiana. And Sheila, gosh, she's an incredibly hardworking person, and she texted me the following. She said, "Todd, I saw you on C-SPAN today. I really appreciate how you bring up the Hoosiers. When you're writing this next bill, please consider small businesses like my husband and I have. Pat is the lone legal owner of our catering business. We invested all the revenue made over the few years into our business buying equipment, etc. Because of this investment, we had an impressive schedule of events this past spring, summer, and fall lined up. This time of year gives our barbecue business our greatest exposure and opportunity for financial gain. We were ineligible for a PPP loan because we did not show a profit. When composing the next PPP, please consider single-person business owners like our barbecue and catering business. God bless you. Well, God bless you, Sheila. You know, it's hardworking people and couples and partnering Americans that help build this country. It's innovators and entrepreneurs and doers and dreamers and workers like Sheila Gramaglia. If we don't provide this much-needed relief now, I'm really concerned that we're going to be in a far worse position in the weeks and months to come, as more businesses close permanently. They go bankrupt. They're no longer paying payroll taxes. And then there's greater damage done to the economy and to our nation's balance sheet. I'm also concerned about our ability as a country to fully recover once there is a vaccine available. You know, it's our small and medium-sized enterprises, which you disproportionately find in states like Indiana, the heartland of the country, where so much innovation occurs. It's not always in these large businesses. It's the smaller enterprises where the innovation occurs, and then ultimately it's the big businesses that acquire these innovative businesses. So we want these engines, these incubators of innovation, these small businesses, medium-sized businesses that are innovative and entrepreneurial to survive this difficult time. They're also pillars, frankly, of Main Street America. We take pride in our small businesses, many of which have been so hard hit. We don't want to hollow out Main Street America on the back end of this. The most fiscally irresponsible thing we could do here at the federal level of government is to fail to respond to the needs of these small and medium-sized enterprises. So the additional assistance that I'm calling for is critical to, for example, the more than 500,000 manufacturing employees in the state of Indiana, the most manufacturing-intensive state in the country. It's also critical to the 200,000 Hoosier restaurant employees laid off or furloughed since March. You know, we've been able to provide them some short-term assistance, but this virus and the challenges associated with it have lingered on much longer than all of us had hoped, and we're going to have to help out these employers so they have a place to go back to work to once we figure this thing out. This assistance is critical to the small music venues that enrich our local communities throughout the state of Indiana and across our country. They're facing permanent closure too. And the countless restaurants, gyms, salons, boutiques, hotels, retailers, and other small businesses that are essential pillars of our communities. I grew up in a small business family. We had our up years, we had our down years, we had some rough Christmases. You know, my dad, my mom, they took great pride in that family business. They made it. They worked hard. But they saw nothing like this virus. We need to help these businesses. These businesses are in dire straits not because any bad business decisions were made, but instead because this virus came from overseas, disrupted our lives, and in the interest of public health, our employees had to stay home. People stopped buying the same things they were buying. Our shopping patterns changed. At some point, we will resume some semblance of normalcy. We're getting there. But in the meantime, we need a bridge to the other side of this virus. We need to make sure that all of the provisions of the Restart Act make it into the HEALS Act. So since Senator Bennett and I introduced the Restart Act in May, our legislation has received support from more than 40 bipartisan senators. I'm proud of that. There's a lot of hard work going on in the U.S. House of Representatives to get members of the House to sign up as well. It's also been endorsed by roughly 50 national organizations and more than 50 Indiana businesses. And these are prominent national organizations, including, for example, the National Association of Manufacturers. Now, given the widespread support for the Restart Act, I will continue to work with my colleagues to ensure that more of it's included in the final coronavirus package. I hope we get all of it included. We have to ensure that we are caring for those who have suffered the most. And to Sheila and to Pat, you have my word. You have my word, as you did the first day we met, that I would do everything I could to fight for the people of Indiana, to fight for what is right, to fight tirelessly on behalf of my customers, which is you and the millions of Hoosiers I represent, answering only to my ultimate boss, God and the Constitution. I will fulfill that pledge and continue fighting for all of you during this difficult time. Thank you so much, Mr. President.